Good morning. Welcome to Hope Fellowship of Somerset. We meet every Sunday morning at 10 a.m. most of the time. Today I've been running a bit late, but sometimes what's worth waiting for is worth waiting for. Today our congregation has stayed home because of the cold weather, but we're still having a real preaching and singing service. Of course, at this point in time, it was probably best that you didn't hear me playing the music. Today is the first day of the festival of Hanukkah, which plays a part in the Christmas story. And I'll explain that as I go through the sermon. I hope you all have a good understanding of the history of Hanukkah when I'm done with this, preaching this particular sermon. Today is December 18th, 2022. I can't believe, I mean, I still remember as an 8-year-old the fun I was having in 1962. Where'd that time go? Right? Well, I enjoy the Christmas season. I love the Christmas season. I love celebrating it. I have a wife who loves celebrating it. I have a grandchild who sometimes celebrates it. And that's a different story for a different time. So for our friends who are in Uganda, I'll try to keep it slow. You probably will feel this doesn't apply to you, but it really does. And for our friends in Cuba, same thing. And our friends in Pakistan, India, and Indonesia, we love and glorify the Father for you because you're doing a hard work, especially at the possible executions you could face if you are rounded up in those countries. For our friends Gina, Patience, and Cindy, I think you're going to enjoy this. I know you know my thoughts on Christmas, and I hope that this will bring a joy to your heart. All right. Hanukkah celebrates Israel's freedom from Syria. Maccabean forces defeated Syria against overwhelming odds. Father in heaven, as I preach this word and teach the history of Hanukkah, I pray that all of our congregation here and everyone who listens to us online will grasp the significance and the joy of celebrating Hanukkah. I pray that you'll be glorified in this sermon as it's preached, and I pray that everyone who hears it will have a special and better appreciation for the season of Hanukkah. In Yeshua's name, Amen. Cannot even see the trees. A star-struck young lady was invited to a Hollywood Christmas party. She spied a star. She was sure she knew and went up to him and I'm a huge fan, she said. May I touch your neck? The actor stepped back and said, What are you talking about? She blurted, Aren't you Zach Woods? No, I'm James Woods, he answered with some annoyance. I'm so sorry, she confessed. I guess I was in the wrong neck of the woods. Today's scripture reading is James 1:16 through 18. The only one shaking her head is my wife. Everyone else laughed. Doesn't bode well for this afternoon. Again, James 1:16 through 18. My dear brothers and sisters, do not be led astray. Every good present and every perfect gift comes from above, from the Father of heavenly lights. The Father does not change like the shifting shadows produced by the sun and the moon. Elohim decided to give us life through the word of truth, to make us his most important creations. James, whose real name is Jacob, is the half-brother of Yeshua, so he really knows what he's talking about, right? Hanukkah is a type of the new heavens and new earth, where Yahweh our Elohim, the Father of lights, will live with his people. This year, Hanukkah begins on Sunday, Monday, December 18th and 19th, which becomes Israel Sunday after 6 p.m. It ends 8 days later on Monday and Tuesday, December 26th and 27th of 2022. Why is Hanukkah important for Christians to understand and even celebrate? It was during what is known as the Festival of Lights, called Hanukkah, that Messiah was conceived by Miriam or Mary. It's also called the Festival of Dedication. And there's a reason for that. And I'll get to that. During December 4 BCE, Yahweh's angel Gabriel revealed to Miriam or Mary that she would become pregnant with a son to be the Savior, who was Emmanuel, meaning El is with his people. It was during Hanukkah that this took place. Hanukkah in 4 BCE took place from December 14th and 15th until December 21st and 22nd. Between December 14th and 15th until December 21st and 22nd, she became pregnant. Now, I was talking to Julie and Shirley about this, and I thought it would be fun, since my birthday is December 16th, wouldn't it be a hoot if the Messiah was conceived on the 16th? That would be an interesting tidbit to think about, wouldn't it? Since that was my birth date. Luke 1:26 through 31 says, in the 6th month of Elizabeth's pregnancy, Yahweh sent the angel Gabriel to Nazareth, a village in Galilee, to a virgin named Miriam. She was engaged to be married to a man named Joseph, a descendant of King David. Gabriel appeared to her and said, greetings, favored woman. Yahweh is with you. Confused and disturbed, Miriam tried to think what the angel could mean. Do not be afraid, Miriam, the angel told her, for you have found favor with Yahweh. You will conceive and give birth to a son, and you will call him Yeshua, name him Yeshua. That took place, I believe, on December 14th and 15th of Hanukkah. There are 7 festivals of Yahweh containing the last days' chronological timeline. These festivals are complete with types and shadows of Messiah in them. They cover 7,000 years of human history. The 7 festivals complete Yahweh's chronology of the last days. Following them is Hanukkah, called the Festival of Lights. It is the 8th and final festival of Israel and represents a new beginning. Hanukkah is an extension of the Sukkoth festival because it was delayed while Yahweh's hammers, the Maccabees, hammered their enemies who were at war with Antiochus IV as they were. Pun intended. Hanukkah is an extension, Mark 13:24 through 27 reveals, but in those days after the tribulation the sun will be darkened and the moon will not give light, the stars of heaven will fall, and the powers of in the heavens will be shaken. Then they will see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of with great power and glory. And he will send his angels and gather his elect from the 4 winds, from the farthest part of earth to the farthest part of heaven. The powers of the second heavens will lose their covering in the invisible realms of the first and second heavens at the return of Messiah. They will be cast to the earth and seen as they really are. Isaiah 34:4 declares, all the host of heaven will be dissolved, and the heavens will be rolled up like a scroll. All their hosts, will fall down as the leaf falls from the vine, and as fruit falling from a fig tree. At the end of the Great Tribulation, Messiah will return with his bride, who made herself ready and wears heaven's fine linen, along with myriads of angels to celebrate her marriage to the Lamb. You're still asking why I'm doing this. You'll find out. Revelation 19:6-9 says, and I heard, as it were, the voice of a great multitude, as the sound of many waters, and as the sound of mighty thunderings, saying, Alleluia! For Yahweh Elohim, the Omnipotent, reigns. Let us be glad and rejoice and give him glory. For the marriage of the Lamb has come, and his wife has made herself ready. And to her it was granted to be arrayed in fine linens, clean and bright, for the fine linen is the righteous acts of the saints. Then he said to me, Write, Blessed are those who are called to the marriage supper of the Lamb. And he said to me, These are the true sayings of Elohim. The rest of rebellious humanity will be cast into hell's holding cells after they have faced defeat and death at the hands of Messiah. Their spirits will wait for them until they stand before Messiah. Revelation 19:19 through 21 declares, And I saw the beast, the kings of the earth, and their armies gathered together to make war against him who sat on the horse and against his army. Then the beast was captured, and with him the false prophet who worked signs in his presence, by which he deceived those who had received the mark of the beast and those who worshipped the image. These two were cast alive into the lake of fire burning with brimstone, and the rest were killed with the sword, which proceeded from the mouth of him who sat on the horse, and all the birds were filled with their flesh. When Messiah returns with his bride and his angels, he will destroy the tribulation enemies and chain Satan, his fallen angels, and their demonic offspring in hell's darkest level, which is Tartarus. Revelation 20:1 through 3 tells us, Then I saw an angel coming down from heaven, having the key to the bottomless pit and a great chain in his hand. He laid hold of the dragon, that serpent of old, who is called the devil and Satan, and bound him for 1,000 years. And he cast him into the bottomless pit, and shut him up, and set a seal on him, so that he should deceive the nations no more until the 1,000 years were finished. But after these things he must be released for a little while. When Yeshua returns to earth again, it will be in the glory and fullness of his persona as majestic Adonai Yahweh. His return will eliminate all atheism, sin, and unholiness. Messiah will establish the righteous and just rule and reign of Yahweh Adonai on the earth. The earth will be filled with the righteousness of Yahweh our Elohim. Yeshua himself will rule and govern in the affairs of the universe during his millennial reign. This is Yeshua's prophetic 1,000-year reign of heaven's kingdom on the earth. No person, nation, technology, or science will be able to perfect humanity, the earth, or the universe. Elohim will restore this universe through Messiah after the Armageddon War. After the Armageddon War, the supernatural power that causes all atheism and evil in this dimension of space, time, and matter, Satan, will be held in Tartarus custody in an unbreakable lock and chains. Who is going to remove Satan from the earth? An angelic messenger will be dispatched by Messiah. The angelic messenger will descend from heaven at Messiah's command. His name is Michael. He will be dispatched from Elohim's presence to remove Satan from this dimension and bind him in Tartarus. Some biblical scholars believe this messenger is Yeshua, but it will be an angelic jailer. Only Messiah holds the keys of hell and death. Yeshua would never, under any circumstance, surrender those keys to anyone or anything else. He is the designer and creator of the universe. Messiah Yeshua himself wrenched the keys of death and the grave from Satan's hands when he shed his precious blood on Calvary's cross. He defeated sin, death, and the grave forever. The angel carries two keys in his hands. One is the key to Tartarus. The other is the key to the lock and chains that will hold Satan in custody in Tartarus. He will be given the authority to bind Satan. Satan will be locked in heavy chains and bound in Tartarus for a millennium. He will not deceive believers, unbelievers, or the nations. He will be unbound at the end of Messiah's millennial reign. Satan will be held in custody during Messiah's millennial reign of 1,000 years. It is at this time in history when Messiah Yeshua, our returning eternal King, will establish his millennial kingdom. Revelation 24 reveals, I saw the thrones, and they sat on them, and judgment was committed to them. Then I saw the spirits of those who had been beheaded for their witness to Yeshua and for the word of Elohim, who had not worshipped the beast or his image, and had not and had not received his mark on their foreheads or on their hands. And they lived and reigned with Messiah for 1,000 years. We will reign with Messiah for the 1,000 years of his millennial reign, governing over the nations until Satan is released to wreak havoc and tempt humanity to reject her king Messiah. Revelation 27 through 10 says, Now, when the 1,000 years have expired, Satan will be released from his prison and will go out to deceive the nations which are in the four corners of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them together to battle, whose number is as the sand of the sea. They went up on the broad plain of the earth and surrounded the camp of the saints and the beloved city. And fire came down from Elohim out of heaven and devoured them. The devil who deceived them was cast into the lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and the false prophet are. And they will be tormented day and night forever and ever. After Satan is released, he will wreak havoc on humanity and tempt each person, including all believers, to turn from their faith in Messiah and join him in his crusade to destroy Jerusalem. Revelation 21, 1 through 4 declares, Now I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth had passed away. Also there was no more sea. Then I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from Elohim, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from heaven saying, Behold, the tabernacle of Yahweh is with men, and he will dwell with them, and they will be his people. Elohim himself will be with them and be their Elohim. And Elohim will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death, nor sorrow, nor crying. There will be no more pain, for the former things have passed away. Now I'm getting to the meat of the introduction. At the final victory of the saints over Satan, Halel, at the end of Messiah's millennial reign, those of us who endure to the end will be given our immortal, incorruptible, and unchangeable bodies. We will be as one when we appear, because we will be revealed as Messiah's pure bride. It is in our new bodies, which we will receive then, that we will flourish in the new heavens and new earth. Isaiah 65 tells us that we will not even remember our previous lives when we enter into the new heavens and earth. We will never remember our sinfulness, pain, heartache, sickness, or fear again. Isaiah 65, 17 through 19 reveals, For behold, I create a new heavens and a new earth, and the former will not be remembered or come to mind. But exalt and rejoice forever in what I create. Indeed, I create New Jerusalem for rejoicing, and her people a joy. I will rejoice in Jerusalem and joy in my people. The voice of weeping will no longer be heard in her, nor the voice of crying. We believers will live eternally with our husband, Messiah Yeshua, and Abba Yahweh, the Father of lights, whose good and perfect gifts have been prepared and provided to us, lasting forever. James 1:16 through 18 again says, Whatever is good and perfect is a gift coming down to us from above, from the Father of heavenly lights. The Father does not change like the shifting shadows produced by the sun and the moon. Elohim decided to give us life through the word of truth to make us his most important creations. Hanukkah will be held throughout the eternal kingdom of light. After a time of trouble and war, Messiah will separate the goats, unbelievers, from the sheep, believers, and send unbelievers to hell. Under the Maccabean victory over Syria, Israel was delivered from the Syrian Greek Empire. The temple in Jerusalem was cleansed, the Holy of Holies was restored, and worship of Yahweh began. We will be experiencing Hanukkah for the entire time that we are in the new heavens and new earth, because we will be celebrating it with the Father of lights, who gives us his good gifts, and they will last for eternity. I know that's added to the sermon, but it's important to note. Going to point 1, Hanukkah is the festival of lights. It is observed as an annual event in Israel. It is celebrated as the Maccabean victory over Syria. This is its history. Over 2,000 years ago, Israel was part of the Syrian Greek Empire, dominated by Syrian rulers of the dynasty of the Seleucids. The Seleucid kings were pagan tyrants who worshiped false gods. To understand the importance of Hanukkah, we need to understand its history so that we can relate the story that led up to Hanukkah, which is written in the biblical history books of the Maccabees. The history begins with Antiochus III, the king of Syria, who reigned from 3538 to 3574, or 222 to 186 BCE. Antiochus III went to war with King Ptolemy of Egypt for the possession of Israel. Antiochus III was victorious, so Israel and her people were annexed into his empire. At the beginning of his reign, he looked toward the Jews with favor and provided for them many privileges. However, when the Roman Empire defeated him, he was forced to pay very high taxes to it. The burden to pay those taxes fell on the citizens of the various countries under the rule of his empire. When Antiochus III died, his son Seleucus IV took over control of his empire and oppressed the Jews, who were supposed to have many treasures in the temple from gifts of tithes and offerings. Israel was not only pressured from the Seleucids, but was also threatened from within. Influence of Hellenistic Jews, who were Greek-speaking Jews who tolerated idol worship, had increased. John, the high priest during that time, realized the danger posed to Judaism through persistence of the Syrian Greek influence that was pressuring Israel, including idol worship of false gods. Israel's faith, which is called Judaism, emphasized truth and moral purity as commanded by Elohim in his holy Torah. They would never give up their faith in Elohim and accept Syrian idol worship. John was opposed to any attempt on the part of Jewish Hellenists to introduce Greek and Syrian cultures and traditions into their land. The Hellenists hated him and made false accusations about him. One of these Hellenistic Jews reported to Seleucus IV's commissioner that in Israel's treasury of the temple there was a great deal of wealth, such as gold, silver, and precious jewels. The wealth in the treasury consisted of the combinations of half a shekel made by each adult Jew living in Israel annually, which was given to maintain the altar for the purpose of the sin sacrifice. These contributions were also for maintaining and improving the temple itself. Part of the temple treasury contained the orphan funds, which were deposited for them when they became adults. Seleucus needed money in order to pay the Romans, so he sent his minister Heliodras to take the money from the treasury of the temple. John, as the highest priest, begged him not to take these funds. Heliodras did not listen and entered the gate of the temple. Suddenly he became pale from fright. The next moment he fainted and fell to the ground. After he came to, he did not dare enter again. Later in his reign, Seleucus IV was assassinated in 175 by his chief minister, Heliodorus. His brother Antiochus IV seized the throne and began his tyrannical rule over Syrian's empire. Antiochus IV was a tyrant who had a rash and impetuous nature. He was contemptuous of religion and of the feelings of others. He was called Epiphanes, meaning beloved of the gods. Several other Syrian kings received similar accolades, but Polybius an historian of Antiochus' time, gave him the epithet Epimanes, meaning madman, a more suitable title to this cruel king's character. Antiochus IV wanted to unify his kingdom through establishing a common religion and culture. He tried to remove individualism. Have we ever heard of that in these days? Sorry, that was a advertisement that I could have waited on. Anyway, he tried to remove individualism that each Jew exercised by removing the Jewish Torah system. He removed the righteous high priest John from the temple in Jerusalem and placed as his puppet priest John's brother Joshua, who preferred to call himself by the Greek name of Jason. Jason was a member of the Hellenist party, and he used his high office to spread Greek culture, customs, and traditions throughout the Levitical priesthood, polluting its influence and power. When John, his brother, the former high priest, protested against the spread of Hellenistic influence among the priests in the temple, Jason, as ruling high priest, hired mercenaries to assassinate him. Joshua, called Jason, was replaced later by Menelaus, and who had reportedly promised to Antiochus IV that he would bring in more money than Jason, the puppet high priest, ever did. Antiochus IV was engaged in a successful war against Egypt at that time, but messengers from Rome were sent to command him to stop that war. They strongly compelled him to yield. During that time, a rumor spread that Antiochus IV had a serious accident in Jerusalem. All Israel, believing he was dead, rebelled against the treacherous high priest Menelaus, who fled Jerusalem. Enter the Maccabees, the hammers of Elohim's justice, to fight against King Antiochus IV and to liberate Jerusalem from his tyrannical rule and reign. Hanukkah is a celebration of rededication or renewal of the temple by the Maccabees after it was defiled for 2 years earlier by Antiochus Epiphanes in honor of Zeus, the sun god he worshipped. According to the book of Maccabees, Hanukkah is an extension of Sukkoth. Israel was still in disarray and on the run during the Sukkoth festival of 169 to 168 BCE under Antiochus Epiphanes. 2 Maccabees 10:1-8 proclaims, Judas Maccabeus and his followers, under the leadership of Yahweh, recaptured the temple and the city of Jerusalem. They tore down the altars which foreigners had set up in the marketplace and destroyed the other places of worship that had been built. They purified the temple and built a new altar. Then, with new fire started by striking flint, they offered sacrifices for the first time in 2 years, burned incense, lighted the lamps, and set out the sacred loaves. After they had done all this, they lay face down on the ground and prayed that Yahweh would never again let such disasters strike them. They begged him to be merciful when he punished them for future sins and not hand them over any more to barbaric pagan Gentiles. They rededicated the temple on the 25th day of the month of Kislev, the same day of the same month on which the temple had been desecrated by the Gentiles. The happy celebration lasted 8 days, the festival of shelters, which is Sukkoth or tabernacles, and the people remembered how only a short time before they had spent the festival of shelters wandering like wild animals in the mountains and living in caves. But now, carrying green palm branches and sticks decorated with ivy, they paraded around, singing grateful praises to Yahweh who had brought about the purification of his own temple. Everyone agreed that the entire Jewish nation should celebrate this festival each year. Hanukkah is a type of second Sukkoth or Tabernacles festival where the temple body is restored or rededicated as a type of Messiah's second coming. It was celebrated every year after in victory. As history records, one day of Antiochus IV's, as history records, one day one of Antiochus IV's henchmen traveled to Modin, a village near Jerusalem, where Matthew, the high priest and leader of the Maccabees, lived and served Yahweh. This henchman was a Syrian officer who had built an altar in the marketplace of the village. He then demanded the priest Matthew offer sacrifices to his false gods. He refused. Deuteronomy 6, and 7 declares, I am Yahweh your Elohim, who rescued you from the land of Egypt, the place of your slavery. You must not have any other God but me. Matthew then replied to Antiochus IV's Syrian officer and declared, I, my sons, and my brothers are determined to remain loyal to the covenant which our Yahweh made with our ancestors. At this time, a Hellenistic Jew approached the altar to offer a sacrifice. Matthew grabbed his sword and killed him. His sons and friends attacked the Syrian officer and his troops. They killed most of them and chased the rest away. They then destroyed the pagan altar the Syrian officer had built. Matthew knew this would infuriate Antiochus IV when he heard what happened. Antiochus IV sent Syrian troops to kill Matthew, his sons, his brothers, and his followers. Matthew then fled to the village of Modin with his sons, brothers, and followers into the Judean hills. At this point, all of Israel's loyal and courageous Jews joined them in the hills. They pledged their support for the family of the Hasmoneans, which of course were Matthew, his sons, and his brothers. So these Israelites formed legions. From time to time they left their hiding places to attack enemy detachments and outposts and to destroy pagan altars that were built by order of Antiochus IV. Prior to his death, Matthew called his sons and brothers together and then urged them to continue their fight against Antiochus IV and his armies in defense of Yahweh's Torah. He urged them to follow the counsel of their brother Simon the Wise. He told them that in waging warfare against Antiochus IV, they should choose as their leader Judah the Strong. Judah and his family of warriors were called Maccabees. The title was comprised of 4 Hebrew characters of the words Mikamacha Elim Hashem, meaning who is like you, our Elohim. Antiochus IV and General Apollonius and his troops, sent General Apollonius and his troops to wipe out Judah and the Maccabean troops. Though they were greater in number and weapons than the Maccabees, the Syrians were defeated. Antiochus IV sent out another contingent of troops which were also soundly defeated. He realized that only by sending a powerful army could he hope to defeat Judah and the Maccabean troops. Antiochus IV sent out a vast army containing more than 40,000 troops, which swept the land under the leadership of their 2 commanders, Nicanor and Gorgias. When Judah and his brothers heard of that, they exclaimed, "Let us fight unto death in defense of our souls and our temple." They assembled at Mizpah, where the prophet Samuel sought Elohim. After a series of battles, the war was won by the Maccabees, who then returned to liberate Jerusalem. They entered the temple and cleared it of the idols that placed there by the Syrian soldiers. Judah and his followers built a new altar for the temple, which he dedicated on Kislev 25/36/22, which is around 165 BCE on the Julian calendar. Unfortunately, since the original golden menorah for temple worship was stolen by Syrians, Judah and the Maccabean relatives had to replace it with a menorah made of cheaper metal. That goes to the third point. Hanukkah, the festival of lights, has been observed and celebrated like Purim. It takes place on Kislev 25 during the months of November and December. According to legend, To light the temple menorah, they found only a small cruse of pure olive oil bearing the seal of the high priest John. It was only sufficient to light the temple for 1 day. By a miracle of Elohim, it continued to burn for 8 days, until new and pure olive oil was made available. This miracle proved that Elohim had again taken his people under his protection. After these events, ancient rabbis called for the 8 days of lighting the temple menorah to be observed for the annual thanksgiving of their victory, calling it Hanukkah, the Festival of Lights. After the brightness of the first Hanukkah lights had slowly dimmed, the holy fires on the altar burned again in the temple, from morning to morning, as commanded by Elohim's Torah. The priests were assigned their places and continued to busily officiate in the system of Torah. Day in and day out they prepared the offerings. Order and peace were finally reestablished in Israel. Jewish farmers who had followed the Maccabees in warfare longed to return to their land after 2 years of hardship, deprivation, and danger while serving in the victorious Jewish army. It was finally time for them to break the ground and till the soil to make it fallow for growth, so that the barley harvest would be ripened in time for the Omer offering at the festival of Passover. Jewish farmers had left their plows to rally for the Maccabees, the hammers of Elohim. Their first victories drew even skeptics into the ranks of the Jewish rebels led by the sons of Matthew. Farmers deserted their land. Merchants and tradesmen left their stores and shops. Torah students left their biblical studies to join in the fight against their Syrian oppressors and their troops. The songs of victory filled the reclaimed holy temple, and praise and gratitude toward merciful Elohim. The goal of the battle seemed reached, and Torah was again Israel's supreme law. Judah Maccabee realized Israel's return to normal living had not yet come. Israel was not quite ready to relax just yet. She would have to be ready and fight against her overwhelming enemies. Judah Maccabee was admired by Israel as Israel's hero, a man with a lion's heart who lived out a childlike faith. His name was spoken in awe by every Jew, was admired in every Jewish heart, and was admired in every Jewish heart. He was known as the one whose mighty armies fought and soundly defeated Syria. Yet he never failed to seek Elohim, the master of their battles, before he warred against his enemies. It was not bloodlust that made Judah Maccabee stay in his camp. His heart longed to return to his former peaceful life in the quiet town of priests, Modin, where his loving father was buried. Bloodshed and battle proved to be a hard and undesired life for the Maccabean men of Judah, who preferred living at peace rather than in battle. Judah Maccabee knew Israel could not be at peace yet. Not only did he have to stay and lead his armies, but with all the persuasion that his leadership gave him, he had to hold his armies back from going home, because he was convinced the war was not over. He was right. He reasoned with his two brothers, Simon and Jonathan, and told them that the first phase of this war against Syria was over, but hard and desperate measures were coming. There were new enemies besides the Syrians, lurking behind the scenes, preparing an assault against the unsuspecting Jewish armies with better trained troops and superior weaponry at their disposal. Neighboring Arab countries envied the glaring victories of Israel's small Jewish armies. They much rather wanted Israel oppressed and humiliated than armed and emboldened threats to their enemies. Oh, the Ahab hatreds reared their ugly heads. The descendants of Edom, the Idumeans, the Ammonites, the Philistines, and the Phoenicians all revived their ancient jealousies over Israel's prominence. Messengers arrived from Gilead to warn Judah Maccabee of the pagans who had evil intentions and of their preparations in Ptolemais Tyre, and Sidon to join forces to make war against Israel. These messengers from Gilead found that Judah Maccabee was already at work building up the fortifications around Mount Zion, the temple, and the city of Jerusalem. Towers, walls, weapons, and a moat were being constructed opposite the fort, still held by their worst enemies, the Hellenistic Jews, under the leadership of the false priest Menelaus. The Hellenistic Jews hated everything Jewish and lived in hope that the Syrian marauders would return. Judah Maccabee prepared Jerusalem against them and the imminent assault by Antiochus IV. Under the supervision and leadership, the Jews worked feverishly to refill their arsenals of weapons and turn the whole land of Israel into a countrywide stronghold against invasion from their enemies. Once this most important task was accomplished, Judah Maccabee led his freshly trained troops to aid the regions and villages assaulted by the envious Arab neighbors surrounding Israel. He drove the Idumeans from Hebron. He punished those who acted with animosity against Jewish settlers, and he led his army across the Jordan River to war against the Ammonites. Their capital fell before the furious onslaught of the Jewish troops, as did the fortress at Yassar. Judah's brother Simon led his troops north to aid the Jews who were being harassed in Galilee. Under Judah Maccabee's leadership, Israel defeated her enemies and cleared them from Israel. At his urging, Jewish settlers who fled to Jerusalem returned to rebuild their homes in safety. Judah and Jonathan Maccabee joined forces and marched against Gilead, where they were met with some of their strongest resistance. This campaign was successfully concluded by Pentecost. Judea was free again, and all the areas of Israel which were captured by neighboring Arab countries were restored, as their enemies were soundly defeated by the Maccabean hammers of Elohim. It would be really good if the enemies of Israel would learn this lesson from the past, but they're still going to get pounded if they attack Israel, and we will be praying that they will be soundly defeated. These victories brought on celebrations which transformed Jerusalem and the Holy Temple. These hard-won victories took place hardly 6 months after their victories over the armies of Antiochus. The people of Israel expressed their joy and gratitude to Elohim with psalms, hymns, and offerings. He had restored Israel's glory and brought liberty back to the Jewish homeland. In conclusion, nearly 2,200 years ago, the Greek-Syrian ruler Antiochus IV tried to force Greek culture down Israel's collective throats. Jews in Israel were forbidden the sacrificial system and study of Torah. Vastly outnumbered, religious Jews in Israel took up arms to protect their communities and their faith. Led by Matthew the priest and later his son Judah Maccabee, they won their independence. After 3 years of fighting, in the year 3597, which was around 165 BCE, Maccabean armies victoriously reclaimed the temple on Jerusalem's Mount Moriah and Mount Zion. Next, they prepared the temple for rededication. In Hebrew, Hanukkah means dedication. In the temple, they found just enough purified oil to light the temple menorah for a single day. Miraculously, I love that word, its light burned 8 days while Maccabean forces defeated their oppressors. Lighting of the menorah, which in Hebrew is called the Hanukkah, is the most important Hanukkah tradition. A menorah is a candlestick having 9 branches with 8 candles for each day of Hanukkah. They are the same height, but the middle branch is taller, called the servant, and is used to light the others. Each evening of a Hanukkah, 1 candle is lit with special blessing spoken over each. The menorah symbolizes the burning light in the temple and marks the 8 days of the Hanukkah festival. The symbolism is sometimes lost to the celebration of Hanukkah, the festival of lights. It lasts for 8 days. It is the 8th festival Israel celebrates. Note that the number 8 means new beginnings. This festival, I believe, is a type of New Jerusalem, and on the on the new earth, in the new heavens, where all believers from every nation, tribe, and language will be with the Father of lights for eternity. There will be no darkness in the new heaven, new Jerusalem, and new earth, because Messiah, our Creator, will be our light, and we will bask in his glorious presence forever and ever. John 8:12 tells us from the Aramaic New Covenant writings, Yeshua spoke to the people once more and said, I am the living Elohim, the light of the world. If you follow me, you will not have to walk in darkness, because you will have the light that leads to life. One of the most important aspects of celebrating Hanukkah is that Yeshua the Messiah observed and celebrated Hanukkah. He revealed that he is the world's light in John 8:12 and John 10:20 through 24. In benediction, John 10:22 through 30 says, It was now winter, and Yeshua was in Jerusalem at the time of Hanukkah, the festival of dedication. He was in the temple, walking through the section known as Solomon's Colonnade. The people surrounded him and asked, How long are you going to keep us in suspense? If you are the Messiah, tell us plainly. Yeshua replied, I have already told you, and you do not believe me. The proof is the work I do in my Father's name. But you do not believe me because you are not my sheep. My sheep listen to my voice. I know them, and they follow me. I give them eternal life, and they will never perish. No one can snatch them away from me, for my Father has given them to me, and he is more powerful than anyone else. No one can snatch them from the Father's hand. The Father and I, the living Elohim, are one. Yahweh has blessed you and will protect you. Yahweh has smiled on you and has been gracious to you. Yahweh has shown you his favor and will give you his shalom, perfect and complete peace. Amen, amen, and amen.
Amen.